G'day and welcome back to Project Twin VNT. The last episode ended with some oil lines that were very shiny and some manifolds that weren't. In this episode it's finally time to start looking at vane control, and the method I'm going to use is the same method that turbos have used for ages: boost pressure.
Turbos have used their own boost pressure to regulate themselves for years. I'll just be doing the same thing, only with vanes instead of a wastegate.
Now, there is an inherent risk with this method. If the small pressure line that feeds the actuator were to split or burst or otherwise cease to exist, then the vanes will return to their fully closed position. If I was under any sort of load when this happened, then bad things would happen to my engine and turbos. There are several options for what I could do to mitigate this.
I could hardline this pressure pipe, but that would still mean soft bits at either end and twice as many clamps. I'm not sure that that's any more reliable than a soft line. I could use two actuators with independent lines from the inlet manifold. I could use external wastegates without connecting anything to the pressure port to act like relief valves.
But I'm not going to do any of these. I've decided I'm just going to live with the risk. It's not very different from how every other turbo car operates anyway, and all I would have to do to limit the damage is lift my foot off the accelerator within about a second or two. Will I be able to manage that? Only time will tell.
What can I say? I like to live dangerously.
I'm going to make a linkage to synchronize the vanes across both turbos. The whole design of the linkage is going to hinge on this, the hinge, but also on how much boost I'm going to run, and that depends on how much fuel I can provide. So how much fuel can you get out of a standard GU 11mm pump?
To work that out, I spent the next week measuring every conceivable part of this pump that I could get my feelers into. This pump was generously donated, in exchange for some of my money, by one of my mates when he upgraded to a 12mm. If this project is finished, I'm going to line up against his 200 horsepower, 650 Nm ute on some private beach in Mexico and flop it out and see whose is bigger. I mean faster. Wait. So, after all that measuring and a bit of guessing, I've come up with this graph, and you can read it like this. The horizontal axis is how much boost you're actually making, and the vertical axis is for how much boost you're providing fuel. This is according to what Nissan thought was a good idea. So to get the most use out of this fuel pump without excessively over-fueling, here's what I've decided to do. First, rotate the fuel pin around to its maximum position. If we go back to the graph for a second, that will have this effect. Notice how now, right from idle, it's providing fuel for 4 psi of boost. That can be improved a little by backing off this limit screw on the top of the diaphragm. Back to the graph again to watch that drop. Lastly, it'd be nice if the top end of the compensator could stretch just a little bit further. I'm going to achieve that by removing this spacer. Final shot of the graphs, I promise. And there we go. So, based on this, I'm going to try and have my boosts begin to regulate at around 9 psi and reach full adjustment by about 12 or 13 psi. Now I know how much boost I want to run. I need to measure the amount of travel I get on my actuator for every psi applied to the diaphragm. This one I had was a bit too stiff, so I bought another one. My turbo vanes travel about 15mm from open to close, and this actuator travels about 7 or 8mm from 10 to 15 psi.
So all of that means my linkage is going to have a ratio of 1:2. That is, the master arm will be half as long as the two slave arms. But I'm probably going to make it adjustable anyway.
Finally, I can start to make the linkage. I've got some M6 threaded rod, some M6 ball or heim or rose joints, some random offcuts, and a piece of 3/8 tube that telescopes inside a piece of 1/2" tube. Start by marking out some lengths on the stainless tube, and then fire up the slow motion grinder. Next, mark and drill some pieces of the random offcut. If only it was this easy to drill through stainless without speeding up the video. Anyone familiar with Newton's third law? These tabs are nearly ready now, but there's a twist. Next, tack the 1/2" tube onto the bracket. Bolt them up to the engine and use the tube to line them up. Once they're aligned, weld on fully. Cut a piece of box section, drill a 10mm hole in the middle, and then slice it in half. Cut some slits in the top, and then relieve some stress. Voila! Attach the rod ends, and then tack it onto the shaft. I actually did remember to put the hinge in before I welded them on too. That's a little too far off to the side, so I cut some V's out and bend them over. That's better. Measure up and cut off some pieces of threaded rod. Time for a test drive. Add some holes for extra lightness.
When I cut out these V's to allow me to put a small bend in it, I cut out way too much. And now that I've added all these extra holes for lightness, it seems like a waste to fill the gap back in again. Instead, I'm just going to try and bridge these corners with a bit of bead, and should add the strength I need without adding too much weight.
When I do that, as the weld cools, it's going to pull this gap slightly closer together. It's in about the right spot now, so I'm going to spread it out. Hopefully it'll end up in the same place when I'm finished. This is quite a large gap to cover, so I'll try to explain the method I used to span it. Start on one side and melt a small drop of filler material into the corner. Then turn the heat off and gently drag the filler material across to the other side as it cools down. Let's try that one more time. Slowly build up from one side to the other until you meet in the middle. If you try and do it in one go, the bead won't be able to support the span while molten and will fall through. It's not pretty, but it'll be strong enough. This is the lower portion of the adjustable arm I've made for the actuator, and this is the upper portion. They screw together like this, and that gives you your adjustability. I'll just weld the lower piece on, and then screw the top section into place with a lock nut. The actuator will sit somewhere in this region, so I'll just knock up a quick bracket for it, and bolt it on.
That'll do for episode 5. I've spent way too long playing with spreadsheets, but vane control is finally sorted. Thanks for watching.